moratorium, obviously. My name is Clayton Cargill. I'm the chair of the board. Also here, we have the board members and some administration. Say hello.
Did that work?
Melissa Conley. Molly Beeson.
Dave Toll.
Larry Fliegelman.
Mark Tucker, superintendent.
All right. So much familiar faces out there. Hi, everybody. Thanks again for coming.
Oh, here it's okay.
Can you?
Do you want us to get the mic out?
All right. It's sitting over there, so it's going to get loud. It's going to get way louder. That's you're asking for it, I guess.
We are.
Good.
You're on the stage.
Yeah.
It's super weird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great.
There's a lot. There'll be another show.
Great.
Well, everybody I'm going to move it into the middle. I just
All right, we'll let him do that before we continue.
I don't know how much it's going to pick up without holding it close. But
I think if it suits a little bit better. Try that. Is that any better? Does that pick up sound? Nothing.
no, I got to turn it off.
You broke it.
I didn't. There you go.
Now I made noise.
Does
I
it
hear
pick
it.
up at all?
Does it echo? Closer. Right.
Let's keep this in.
You guys are really making it weird. You're really making it weird. Okay, that's why it's just.
Pretend you're on a podcast.
Bill can't hear you. Most guys just talk loud.
Yeah. So this may get turned off if you can hear nobody but me, because that's really, that I don't wish that on anybody, but let's go with this for a while. So we're at a special meeting. The first item on the agenda is there. That's really loud now.
Introduce you.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda was, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? We talked about adding that one, so I'm looking for a motion to add. It's Clayton said in the order. So to just talk about the WCAX thing tomorrow, and so I just want to add that, have a discussion with you guys, but I'm not speaking turn tomorrow. So I'd be looking for that motion.
So move.
Thanks, sir.
Second.
Thank you. And then all in favor of adding that at the end? Please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks. So we'll add that at the end, and this is the WCAX. Okay. The first item of business on our agenda, we have two items of business on the agenda. The first one, we're going to talk again about the Danville School building renovation. And what I wanted to do right off the bat is not start with a Q&A. We started with a couple of Q&As, and we've been through the tax presentation twice. What I wanted to do was clarify a couple of questions that had come up. And I hope that we can just get to a point where we can have some answers to some of your questions. And so I have a list here. It's going to give me just a minute to find it again. So the first thing I want to talk about is, in one of the questions last time was, how did we get here? How did we get to this situation? And this is not, I'm not going to start in 1937 with this. I'm going to start in 2019. And so I'm going to share my screen here in a minute. And I'm going to find this one. Share. Share.
Turn off that mic.
Turn this off.
Turn the mic off. Turn the volume up on with that speaker, and then whatever.
Oh, because we're doing both out of the same
Everybody up
speaker.
here.
Okay.
This is very high tech here. So
This is dead now. This is dead.
That's why I turned that down, because the
I'm doing nothing.
It's not great.
it's on.
what you're looking for.
So that's out of the way. I'm going to share an application. I'm going to share this. So this is something that's available to you guys. Molly actually went back through the minutes, and this is one of those things where it's not, she went back through the minutes to sort of make it easier for you to see the timeline of this. So we're going to go back to May of 2019, and what there is in May of 2019 in the school board as it sat then is a discussion about space, and a discussion about where we were deficient. And so we have, and I can read this to you. You can see this. This will be connected to these minutes. I don't know how you guys want to proceed here, but with us, we've seen this stuff and we've been through this stuff. And so in May of 2019, we started talking about our space concerns in the school. And we started talking about what we were going to do about how to find more space for preschool, more space for elementary, and more space for professional. And so there was discussion in May, there was discussion in June, and there was discussion again in September, discussing, the physical space issues. And this is, they started to combine the classroom. This is where you started to see some of the grade 1, 2 stuff. And then the pre-K class moved over to where the weight room is now, where that other classroom sat. And so you started to see quite a bit of rejiggering. And then the rest of some of that had to do with not making teachers move classrooms every year, which had been a longstanding problem. So rather than have teachers move every year as the classes change to get smaller or bigger, it was just to sort of make it where it was easier to do that, to run a school. And so you can look at this stuff, and the one on 9319 is before we've ever employed TrueX, and this is sort of the genesis of we need to find somebody to come in and to assess our needs. And so
the space was the driving factor at first?
certainly among. So this is before we got to the issue of deficiencies or inadequacies but some of them we knew about, but not to this degree. The first thing that drove us was professional space and classroom space, and again, not inadequate space. We knew in 2019 that we weren't ADA compliant in a lot of spots, but we didn't have to be because we were we hadn't done any construction. And we knew also in 2019 that we didn't have sprinkler systems in the pre-K and in the kindergarten, but because we were touching the building for renovations, we could sit as we sat and not have that be an issue. So these issues loomed. The issue of the sprinkler system throughout the whole building was a looming issue that didn't have to be dealt with. And the pressing issue at the time was specifically classroom space, and more specifically professional space to do the interventions that are now part of the education system, as opposed to how it used to be before. And we talked about this the last time, is to line them up and throw the knowledge at them and hope they caught it. And now there's a lot more intervening to sort of course correct with all the students. And there's a lot more professionals in the school than there were before, education professionals.
But there was an initial safety driving force in space, and then the fact that you guys may not have been compliant, but it was still fine that you were in order to building.
Basically, yeah,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
That's what led the discussion.
Okay.
That was the, and so then and then as you go on, we had in this is October of 2019, we had a community night to talk about, and this one was about solar. This one was about trying to get more forward thinking with some of the other stuff that we were doing. And you guys, I would invite you to read through all of this, but this is just some of the stuff that exists in the minutes. And again, I know the minutes are no fun to drive through. And I know I talked to Lance a couple of times, but he's like, show me the minutes, and I'm sitting there for 30 minutes trying to figure it out. So I'm not talking to you anymore today, Lance. I gotta go. It's almost Thanksgiving. So because it's just pulling through the minutes is not a lot of fun. But so here, all this stuff is pulled in.
Yeah. Right.
And so this is, and so we're going to go, and so on 11/5/19, this is about 6 months into the process. We had we had 3 separate firms that were vetted, and so they would come in to interview and say, what we need help with is a needs assessment. We need to assess our needs with you, and we need for you to come in. And so the board expected to choose one of these and do a design study on generating some space. And at the time, we were talking about doing the same thing that had been done here before, which is not touch the existing and then add on, right? Where on the side of this building do you stack some more of these Legos to make more schools so that you have more school? And that was the original plan, was to get, make 3 preschool classrooms and a little cafeteria so that they didn't have to come into the cafeteria. Because the cafeteria, there's such a fight for space. And there were a couple of other ideas at the time that we were talking about. And so that is in November. It's in November. And then in December, they've been met with, and you can look at this. And so they met with 3 different groups, and they interviewed 3 different groups, and the administration of the school vetted these people, met with them, walked them through, and chose the firm TrueX Colors. And so what we wanted you to know here is this is how we got to TrueX Colors. And so then we engaged the firm of TrueX Colors, and you see this at the bottom screen, to do a facilities evaluation and a visioning and concept design for the school. So this is the needs assessment that we talked about originally. This is money paid out of surplus that we did. So we did all this in open meetings, and we did all this over the course of several months to get to the position of what can we do to improve the school in terms of the space. And then as we continued on, you go on and see the lead in this January. Our school is running well, and then we started to look at some of the pressure. And here's the first point here in January of 2020 is we start to look at the fresh air system. And this is before, it's January 2020 is pre-COVID. So this is before fresh air was really the concern that it became just a few months later. And so we're looking at, this is the wood chip, this is the boiler, this is the energy recovery units. The first mention that you'll see in the minutes of the energy recovery units, and these are the air handlers on the top of the school that became a great issue later. And so you'll read through that one as well, and you'll sort of see that what Truex started to see and what put us on the forefront of getting these things fixed with grants was that we were already assessing our needs. And so this is one of the first things that they found was a priority. So this is one of the first, and what we'll talk about in a few minutes is the priorities of repair. But this is the first thing that they found that was an absolute glaring deficiency in the school, that we did not pump fresh air into the school at all or take it out in the winter months at all. And so, and this is all down in here, and you can read through this again. And so, and on we go. So that is just a pull of everything that led up to involving Truex Cullens in there. So I'm going to stop sharing that one for now, and this will be attached to these minutes so you guys can read through this at leisure. I don't want to read a bunch of stuff to you. I'm going to share the next one here. Let me share this one. And then I'm going to see if this comes up. This one. This one. No, this one. Bear with me here, folks. I'm not good at computer. Hold on. All right. I have this somewhere. So I don't know if anybody else has this right up. In the facility evaluation report. So this is the big one. This is the report. This is not what I want. I want Truex, because now Truex is involved. And so what we're going to do now, this is the Truex Cullens, and this is the one, this is the proposal. This is the initial proposal that we're going to get to. And what I want you to see in the initial proposal that we're going to get to is the work that they did, and they had it summarized better than I could summarize it in a minute. And so what you'll see here is you'll see the facility evaluation report. When again, this is the needs assessment. That this is part of the report. In the needs assessment, they started it and issued it in 2019, and it was based on the facility needs without considering educational alignments and initiatives. So that what they're talking about there is the deficiencies and the inadequacies that we had become aware of as we were going along. And then they're going to list us off the priorities. And as you can see here, how the priorities are listed, we have the health, the safety, the welfare, and the code. And those become the things that are the most imperative to fix inside the building as it sits. And so that's what I want you to see. So the three levels are priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 of the plan to, and this is part of the make good stuff, part of it. And so priority 1 is health, safety, welfare, and code. And this is where we start talking about the health and the safety and the code. And they all run together, and that's part of the problem. Health, safety, and code are all the top priority because they have to be. The code has to be the priority. And so then you come down here and you see that this was in 2020, they started to show us this stuff, but we had a community meeting before that. Here's some of the things that were happening, the concepts and everything. And so, and again, this stuff is all available online where you can see it. And this is where we started to get the big numbers. This is the first time that they showed us this big number. Obviously, this is the make good number minus the soft cost in the make good number. And so this is the facility evaluation work is the priority 1 stuff. And so that is where we are with the building. And that's what I need you to see. When you look at these reports, it's really hard to match everything up when you look at this one and then this one and then this one. But what you look at here is they're telling you that this is the stuff that is the priority. And now I'm gonna stop sharing this one, and I want to go over and share another one. And I'm going to share on this one again. And again, it's going to take me a minute. So I'm not super good at this.
That last one, I think, was in your April 5th. I'm not mistaken.
That's right. That's the one. Yeah. But you can see that one on the building page as well. That's going to pop up on the building page inside the thing. And so most of this stuff from here will pop up on the building page, and the note that we just looked at will pop up inside 2 clicks on the building page. And the next one that we want to look at, this is the evaluation report. And what I do with this evaluation report is I do Control F and I do priority until I find priority 1. So it won't take me very long. Wait, maybe it will. If I spell priority right, it won't take me very long at all. If I spell priority 1, I'm not. I'm on this.
Clay, are the definitions of the health, safety, and welfare, what page number are those on?
Definitions of those.
So they're gonna be over in this report, and we're gonna, how we're coded, I'm just lost here. Bear with me. Can somebody else push it up? I guess I'm good. I don't know.
One question, when you say code, is that because you're adding on to the structure?
No.
Or is that because it already has to be done right this minute?
So when we're talking about code, is the schools have a lot of, electricians have codes, and
I know all that.
I know you know all that, but I'm saying it again just so that I can get myself going. So I know that schools have a lot of different coding that they do. And so they have electrical codes, and they have safety codes, and they have health and safety codes, and they have the code about the sprinklers. And so when I say codes, I'm talking about all of the things that don't let a school builder close the wall back up until it's done.
I understand that.
I'm trying to make sure that we both understand.
But that's a good example, like, let's say you're doing the wiring behind the, tearing the wiring out, or taking a wall out to redo wiring. You can't just, I'm ignorant on this, but you can't take commercial pipe and put it on the outside and wire it in between like you get on commercial buildings.
Right. My understanding is that you can't just go on the outside of the wall because that's not the code in the school. You could,
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
yeah, that's that, and we can get some clarifications from that, from this architect firm. But yeah, you can't add on to the outside because it's so much likelier to be damaged, and that's a temporary thing that might be code in the house, but it's not code in the school.
Can I ask another question about code?
Please.
Back to their definitions of health, safety, and code. So as a priority one, I'm going to give you an example in the video standing in this auditorium. If we did not touch this auditorium, we would not have to bring it up to code regarding the wood.
So
Right,
here, so where I am
however,
Mhm.
if we decide to do something to the auditorium, he says that it can't be made of wood and the whole thing has to change. That's entirely true. But anyway, there's code changes that would need to be made then. In priority one is the cost estimate for code changes based on the assumption that we're going to do all the renovations, or is the cost estimate for code changes the things that need to be brought up to code whether we do a renovation or not?
So one of the things that I had intended to get to here in order, but the questions they come as they come, is that this is not the 1937 building and the 1957 building in the state size, and then the auditorium besides. This is one school building. And so when you start a major renovation in one school building, you're then bound to bring that building up to code. And that's why they used to just add on to the outside edges. In some of the other schools where the buildings are freestanding, and you can look at that in one of the places that we're going to get to in a minute, where those buildings are freestanding, they are separate buildings. And so then you could leave a building sitting in, and one of the examples that I would use that you guys have never been to is Cabot School has several different buildings in various states of repair, and they can renovate one of their buildings and be renovating that building. And then they can have their other buildings not be renovated at the same time. But the state considers this building to be one building. And so if you start a major renovation, and I think the number is over $1 million, that came up in one of the conversations, or one of the walkthrough, if you do a renovation inside of this building that costs more than $1 million, that a major renovation, and whatever the numbers for major, that number may be wrong, then you are bound to bring the building up to code. And so then you are looking at putting sprinklers in the whole building, because the sprinklers are a code for building.
You're also
Please.
looking at upgrading the entire electrical system.
But
Once you open up that Pandora's box of codes, everything that falls under code, sprinkler systems, electrical systems, water, things like that, all have to be addressed. And you can't say, well, we just want to put in a sprinkler system. They're going to say, well, what about the electrical system, which is 60, 70 years old, and the 1937 building, it's old.
So
It's
that must
70
be
something
new
years.
then that you have to do that, because other renovations have been done without the entire building, because there's a lot of different code levels at different parts of the building. So that must be a new thing that you have to bring the whole building up to code.
I can't give you the specific timeline, but I would tell you that it's gotten more stringent over time. Things that I would say the things that they got away with in 1986, you can't get away with today. My architect's over there nodding his head when I'm saying that, so I feel pretty comfortable that I'm right about this. So, yeah, this is 2022, and who knows, who knows what attention was paid to any of that back in 86 when they built the building. But they built another structure and tacked it onto an existing building. That's different, but now that it's there, as Clayton said, we have a school building, even though it was assembled from basically 4 different parts over a 70, 80-year period, okay? Now it's one building, and as soon as you crack open something, you're automatically in code land, and everything has to be brought up to code. That's why the idea that, the notion that we can like stage this is very complicated. You can't do the sprinklers 1 year, wait a couple years, and then open everything up and do the electrical system. Plus, the longer we wait on something like the electrical system, the greater our chances are that electrical panel fails in the 1937 building. We're in a lot of trouble because that's a major repair in and of itself. I mean, it could fail. It's not, but it could fail tomorrow, and then we probably have to shut down part of the building. Yes.
And then Clayton had mentioned, just sort of in relevance to what you're saying, is that there might be a money issue involved, like a number, like you said, something of it was over $1 million.
This is, I heard this, I can get that, we'll get this clarified at some point, but I heard it from the architect at one point that came, is that the renovations become major past a certain dollar amount more than anything else. And so.
The 1937, so you're basically at this point, we don't know that there's a safety issue. You guys obviously have concerns because it's older, and if it fails, then we might have to shut this down, that down, etc. But at this point, we're not aware of safety issue related to that.
So this is one
Not a
that,
safety issue, it's a sustainability of the system itself.
Well, that's what I mean.
So like, Clayton, can I just give her an example from another school? So 4 years ago at Twinfield, which was built like in the 1970s, so it was a newer building, we started having problems with one of the electrical panels and could not get replacement breakers. So we had some breakers blow out. We ended up over a two or 3 year period pulling out all the electrical panels. There were 3 or 4, I'm not remembering, over that period of time, and completely replacing those and and that was enough to bring the system up to code, because now they have brand new, 2014, 2015 breaker panels instead of the fuse panels that were in place that we couldn't repair.
And not that this is an ideal situation by any means, but out of curiosity, if there was a failure in the electrical system and you needed to sort of emergency it, like we need to get this, we have to keep school running, etc., that would never fall into a, well, while we're in here, we're required to do this, that, and the other. Ideally, it's not.
I wouldn't say that definitely.
That's what I'm wondering.
here we go.
Yeah, I have a definite answer to that, but I wouldn't.
I asked, during the tour, I asked him that question, and he said if it's an emergency fix, there's no requirement to bring everything else up to code.
Okay.
And not that we want to land in that situation, but just to know that separation.
Yeah.
but in that case, in the 1937 building, you're repairing knob and tube wiring.
Yes, I
It's
know.
super sketchy. It's far less than ideal. So I'm gonna go back again, and again, we're not trying to hammer you to death. We're trying to give you the timeline and give you the idea of how we got to where we're all sitting here together. And so what we have here in the report, and it's hard in the report to read the report and then continue to be reading the report and then continue to be reading the report because it is so boring, and it just goes into all these things. And so the priority 1 stuff in the building is the health, safety, welfare codes. And so this is what I've got. Priority 2 is the next phase down, and that's the worn out stuff. It's not necessarily going to fail. And then priority 3 is the stuff that would enhance the school. And you talk about, this is where you talk about, are there things that you could make the school better with larger classrooms? That would be a situation where with larger classrooms, but this doesn't, the priorities of this don't include enlarging the classrooms right off the bat. And so as you go down through, we're just searching through the word priority. This is how I was trying to figure out to show you some of the stuff. And so here we come to some of this priority stuff, and you go through with the word priority, and you see some of the things that are code violations, health and safety concerns, and they'll start, and then they can highlight them for you in amongst these things on each individual site done by various engineers across the way. And again, you guys can go through that one at your leisure. And and show it to people if they're wondering what we're doing. So I'm going to close that one out now. If that's okay with everybody, is everybody willing to go through that one on your own, and then we'll move on? Okay, and then I'm going to go. Now, this is the next one I wanted to share, and then this is the one that Karina was just discussing. Or that I was discussing this way. So this one is, this is from the state, and this is not in any way related to any of the work that Truex Collins did for us or any of the things that we planned on. The state in a separate act was assessing all of the school buildings in the state, probably because there are so many of these aging buildings and because there's so much crumbling infrastructure in the state. And we got a score in Danville of a 92.72 depleted value, with 100 meaning it's rubble. So 100, if you scored 100, then it's basically a pile of rocks. And so this had absolutely nothing to do with Truex Cullen. This has to do with the school. And so what they've done here is they've come in at a lesser degree.
Just out of curiosity, from this.
This came out, I think I first heard about this in December of 2021.
Okay,
They
that's.
started to study, they just released this, over the summer,
Okay,
yeah.
So I saw, it was one of those things, I saw the number in December 22. So this is something that they were doing over the course of last year, trying to figure out what, and this probably has to do with Winooski, and probably has to do with Burlington and the situation in Burlington and how much money that was going to cost. And this generated somebody to say, well, how bad is it everywhere else? Because a lot of these buildings are very old. And so,
Hey, I have a question.
please,
At the beginning of this whole thing, you said you started this 2019.
yeah, the board did, yes, sir.
When was Truex hired?
We just,
The engineer.
so we started doing this in the early part of 2019, discussing who we were going to hire. And then we talked about this a minute ago. The companies got vetted in late 2019. And then the company Truex was hired at the end of 2019. So we started in March 2019, talking about we need for space, we need a space assessment, we need whatever. And then we vetted those three groups, the administration did rather. The board didn't, the board doesn't,
Do you ever figure out when to pay them?
yeah, I can pull it back up. Hold on. Let me unshare this one.
Just a ball.
So we started off initially and they asked for, the bid was $64,000 and they were going to do the needs assessment and they were going to do the civil engineering and everything. So the original plan was $64,000
How was this paid?
out of our budget surplus.
Your budget surplus?
Yeah.
We have a
This
capital
school
reserve.
is in such disarray. Why is there a surplus?
Because we're taking tuition students and you don't know how many there's going to be. And so a lot of
Shouldn't
times,
that surplus money be spent on fixing this school?
we certainly hope that we can spend some of it on that. Yes, we do. And so this is planning to fix something is similar spending to fixing something.
So in that conversation, the reason that we hired an outside firm is because we needed somebody to say, how do we go about fixing this? And so when we looked at that original budget surplus, we could have looked at a project and said, we're going to start this project and see where it gets us. But we didn't have that. We didn't know where to start. We needed a professional to come in and look at our building and say, where do you need to start and where is your greatest need? So they were hired to produce this priority list. They were hired to do that for us. And that's why we consider that to be a good use of that money. Is because you can't fix the building if you don't know where to start. We didn't hire them saying we're gonna build a new building. We hired them saying we need to fix what we have, and they are, quite frankly, one of the best at doing that. They know schools. They've worked with schools, and they were vetted. I mean, if you ask around about them, they know what they're talking about. They've been in this game. And so the reason, yes, it was a lot of money because we gave them more money after that. It was money. It was surplus money that we spent on that in investing in the school. We needed a starting point, and that was the conversation we had back in 2019. Was we need to make some changes. What is it going to cost us to make those changes, and what changes do we need to specifically make?
and did we ever receive the number of what they had to pay? And are we sort of done with that for now? Like there's no more payment to Truex at this point, like they've done their job at this moment?
So if as of right now, we had the $64,000 payment for the initial needs assessment. Then they had to come in and do some more engineering to start doing some of the drawing and planning work. And that was, I think, it might have been another $63,000. They were close to the same number. So it's like $132,000. And then they're done working, right? They've done all the, they brought on the engineers and everything. And then when we had them come through for the walkthroughs, the walkthroughs were part of this. And then when we were going to have them do the video, then they have another $7,500 that's a retainer to work against. So, but they haven't earned that money. They only earn it by the hour. And so when Cam drove over here to meet the advisory group, when Cam Featherstone all drove over here, then he would bill, you know, his time and whatever against that 7,500.
Thank you.
All right, so back to this one, this building overview, and this building overview you can get to again. I got to it in the minutes. We'll probably, this one might be a good FAQ to drop on the front of this same building page. This will give you an idea, unit by unit, inside the building. Like, it takes me to different, every time I do this, I say that, but it's not super user friendly for me. I think this is just a me thing.
No, it's a Zoom thing.
Oh, am I on it? So I'm just playing computer, guys. I'm just sitting up here playing computer by myself. Chat goes under the screen. Let me go back over here and just do share, share an application. Okay, and so I'm back to this building overview, and then I'm going to put back in Danville School. And so here, in this year, when I talked about Cabot School, you see that Cabot School's got several different buildings listed, and then you go down to Danville School, and Danville School is just simply a single unit building with the square footage and the construction date. And then you can sort of sort the stuff. I think it's going to sort for you. And so you should sort of see an assessment made by somebody. And this really serves for you guys as independent corroboration of some of the situations that we have. And so I'm going to close that one off there. And I'm going to stop my share. Okay. And then after that, we have going back to 4 or 5. We have the presentation of the initial costs based on what we were going to do. And then in that initial plan that they offered us, and this is the ones where the money is just so vast that we're talking about here, that with the big numbers, right? We're getting the big, what their plan was, and what their plan that they were telling us would be a workable plan, and was that first you build a new wing on the side of the school. So that was in the initial plans, and let me share this back. You guys want to see that again? If I just put it up, not this one. Go back over here to this one. Yeah, this one right here. So I'm going to share this one again.
Give me an option. Can
I-
I? What you're filling up?
I'm going to put up the options. Yeah. And so please.
A question regarding the proposals, so before we get into them. I'm trying to wrap my head around they're giving you a proposal based on criteria that they developed. Like they went through and did a full assessment of every single thing wrong in this.
They did a needs assessment.
They
Yeah.
decided from that what needs to be addressed. And then they are giving you a proposal based on their opinion of what needs to be done to, it just feels like.
But they wouldn't be the only bidder.
No. I guess what I'm saying is that it's not as if you came to them and said, we have a list of problems that we know about. We need to figure out how to fix things. We don't know the right order to fix them. We don't know like if other things need to be fixed. Here's a list of issues we have. Here's a list of the space issues that we have specifically. And we need this much more square footage, we need this many more classrooms, and we need this based on research that the state has put out, their guidelines, their recommendations. And if we do this, it will limit these outcomes. So here's what we know that we need. Now we're hiring you as a firm to look at what we're asking within a budget that we have for this town. How do we come up with a solution to address these needs? Instead, it feels like you came to a firm and said, we know some stuff needs to be done, but we don't know really what all needs to be done. So why don't you tell us everything that could possibly need to be done? And then money is no option, and tell us how much that, it just feels, so when you say that they came up with 3 proposals, what were the criteria for the proposals? And at what point was there other input with them? So they didn't need this assessment. They did a full assessment, every little thing, a piece of wood that needs to be resurfaced and polyurethane. When did you then come back and say, okay, here are all the things that you're saying need to be done. We really don't need this.
You mean, what is a priority 1? What is a priority 2?
No,
What is a priority 3?
They came up with a priority.
So
What input was there when was there input from anyone besides Truex Collins to determine what these priorities were? Because they're giving you a proposal based on what?
But Truex met with administrators, Truex met with staff, and Truex met with community members, right?
Yeah, we had a community, we had community.
So
forum.
if they were opened up to, hey, and they said to them, hey, tell us what are the things that you need that you're lacking?
Wish
And,
list.
but also, what is your wish list? So they did take down both information, but they went to a variety, they went to stakeholders. That was their job, was to go to the different stakeholders. The priorities that they use are just the priorities that are used when assessing a building like this. And so like, you can't get around that priority one is health and safety.
Well, priorities are defined by someone.
By the state,
Right,
yeah,
but-
in this case.
But health
The
and
state
safety
encoding.
have to be priority one. And so
Well,
you
like
have to look at
definitions.
something and say, is it healthy and safe?
So,
And I appreciate that.
Okay.
So that kind of brings me back to the definitions of health, safety, and well-being. Where are those defined?
okay,
Are they
so
on
this
the
is something that
state
you want us to
website?
bring in. How are health and safety defined?
And
with-
well-being.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's, and even the code, because I think there's been some debate on, like, what defines that, like, so it was identified as a priority one, right?
Mhm.
So then what is the definition of that? Because did you come up with those? Were they state mandated? What's
There-
creating that?
There's state statute that defines certain criteria for public buildings and especially for public school buildings.
Yeah,
you-
and I
So
imagine
there are
that,
threshold levels,
Yeah.
so we don't get to say, for example, we don't get to look at, say, the priority one items and say, yeah, the electricity in the roof, yeah, but we don't want a sprinkler system. We don't get to say
No,
those
but
things.
you
So
do get to say, oh, that door just needs a coat of paint, I'm gonna build it.
That's in the priority 3, right?
You do. get to-
that's that's not a priority one stuff. And when you get down to a final, what we do not have yet is a complete, we don't have a design that can be built, okay? We don't have a design that can be handed to a contractor and say, go build this, or go build this wing. And we've got a pretty good outline of the internal issues in the existing building, because that was the original, everybody's calling now the make right option. When Truex came in, their responsibility was to subcontract and coordinate with engineers, electrical, plumbing, fire, telecommunications and everything, companies and engineers who know the standards in their particular area of expertise in the context of what is expected or required by law for a public school building in the state of Vermont. So we don't make this up out of whole cloth. They actually have to follow it. That's when we talk kind of loosely about code. There are minimum standards that have to be met. And so Truex, and that first chunk of money that we gave them, it wasn't the architects that were running around the building saying, oh, this would be pretty over here and that would be pretty over there. They had electrical engineers, they had heating, HVAC engineers in here, figuring all that out. And when we got into this in 2019, the intent was to figure out what could we do with the existing building and figure out a way to add a little more space on here, to expand it a little bit. Is there a way to do that within the footprint of the existing building, or maybe by putting, a small wing somewhere? That's where we started from. It quickly became apparent that, what we were thinking of in terms of, renovating existing classrooms, those classrooms are too small to renovate. And what we would have ended up with is fewer classrooms in the existing footprint of this building, which was not the outcome that we were looking for. We're looking for more space. Then COVID hit, okay? And then COVID hit in 2020, and to come back into school in the fall of 2020, we had to stop everything that we were doing with the architect and immediately deal with the fact that the fresh air ventilation system in this building had been inoperable in the winter months for multiple years. It was just shut off because it didn't work. There was no heating. The heaters in the air ventilation system and failed over time, and they were never repaired. Okay, we had to fix that in order to fix the fresh air ventilation in the building, so we could operate the building in the winter months, in the peak time or the initial peak months of COVID, and have school in session in the 2020-21 school year. We stopped all of this new design work. We went out, the board initially went and approved the taking out of a loan to pay for that. It was a $600,000+ project just to fix the indoor air ventilation. Luckily, Efficiency Vermont came forward and said, we have money, and they paid for it. And so the school board did not have to execute the loan. And none of us here who are Danville residents paid for anything. Okay, that was paid for by Efficiency Vermont. That was just a very good fortunate thing, because we were looking at seriously having to spend more than $500,000 to fix an indoor air ventilation system that had to be operable in order to run school in a COVID pandemic. Okay, so then when we got through that, then we restarted. Okay, we got through that, everything's fine. We got heated air fresh air coming into the building and ventilated out. Now we'll get back to figuring out the project. So I think what I sense that, maybe you didn't mean it this way, but when you said, well, when did we start? We started in 2019, it's 2022. But we had some interruptions along the way. We had to take care of some near-term business. You talk about dealing with building problems in an emergency. COVID was an emergency for this building. I'm not going to comment on why, the circumstances of why we didn't have a fresh air ventilation system in this building. We did. It hadn't been operating for years. And the practice had been for years, when it gets cold, shut off the fresh air ventilation and don't bring any fresh air into the building. So for years, we were teaching kids in the school in the winter months with insufficient fresh air. Nobody ever bothered to measure CO2 levels in the building, but I'll bet you they were over danger threshold in some of our spaces, and particularly the indoor inside classrooms that don't have windows. So there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on over the last 3 years trying to figure out what to do with this beautiful old building. And some of it is just it's going to cost some money to fix it. And if we don't fix it, parts of it are going to break at some point, and then we're going to have to. So that's kind of where we are right now.
So to piggyback on his point, if now the energy recovery units are a priority too, they're at the end of their useful lives, but they're functioning properly. And so when you go through the needs assessment again, they're no longer priority 1, but they're still past their useful lives, but they've been made functional recently. And so that was a significant investment we didn't make.
The other thing that we found out, and I have no sense of time anymore because of COVID, but there was an effort underway to install solar electricity, and the Danville Solar Committee, whatever they call themselves,
Energy.
they wanted to put the arrays up on the roof, and they brought engineers in to look at the roof and said, you got 3 or 4 more years of the roof. Don't put anything on that roof without replacing the roof. So that killed that whole solar array on the roof of Danville School. Fortunately, Norwich Solar built that array over on the abutting property, and we were able to buy energy credits from that solar array. We didn't have to install anything in the school. So that was just another piece of fortunate timing. But we were well into and seriously considering putting solar arrays on the roof until their engineers said current roof won't support that. Don't put anything up there, you're gonna have to replace it next week. So there's a lot of things with these buildings that we're gonna have to fix one way or the other.
But I feel it must be also, it's urgent to actually also say, like, we understand totally where you're coming from. I know you spoke about space last time as like the driving force. I know these things are coming up. There has to be upkeep. Of course, we can get into why hasn't there been upkeep, etc. But long story short, we, of course, as a community, want to see it happen. But the other aspect is it has to be financially feasible.
I know.
It cannot knock us down. Every single one of those options
Allison,
knocks
I
us
get
down.
it. I absolutely
It's
get it.
just
I'm a taxpayer in Danville.
I just felt the need. Because we understand where you're coming from, but also please understand where we're really.
Okay, and there's a natural tension between what this is gonna cost and what we need to do.
Right.
We've got to reconcile those
Right.
two tensions.
Well, that's where then that brings me to, I think, the primary question is, have you guys officially dropped the drive on the $75 million build right now? I did ask an email on that. I don't know if you guys have come to that, but I think.
I'm sorry, did we drop?
What is the mission right now? Are you having conversations to figure out a plan, or are you already in your mind? Okay, I'll back up a second. The committee meeting met, and we really also, I think, are at a point where that needs to be dropped, as that is not a real committee meeting, and any vote that they took should not be counted because of how it was, the parameters that were put in that. So I think that really needs to be cut from the record. That was not a real.
It wasn't a committee.
Is it
It was an
advisory?
advisory.
The
group.
advisory.
It
the
it was not a
advisory-
formal committee. The work that they did is acceptable. All that they did was make a recommendation to the school board, and the school board has not acted on it.
Is not.
Has not acted on it.
Has not acted. Well, that's
That's
one of
where
the
we are
concerns
right
that
now.
we're
We're trying to get to a
that-
point.
Right, well, the fact that you're counting that or even wording it as a recommendation is a big concern, because that was not a real recommendation. They
Yes,
were
it
not
was.
allowed to go through any real process.
Well,
They were
I'm,
cut-
Okay, I'm gonna go to Molly real quick here.
I think the reality, we all agree of our situation is we have a small tax base. I personally don't think any of those three options are viable.
And that's what we also really want to know at this point, is we don't know what page you guys are on with regards to moving forward. Are we starting conversations again? Are we going to have another advisory bill committee? Or are you guys already sort of have a plan? Like, we just don't know, because we've asked questions, but we haven't received any feedback.
Yeah, so some
So
of
we
your
need to
questions,
know where you're landing.
your questions are starting points for where we go next,
Okay.
more than your questions are necessarily that I would turn around and give rattle back off 15 answers,
Mhm.
right? And so when we asked for those questions, I didn't want to just turn right around and say Allison 3, Allison 7.
Oh, no, I respect that fully. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we're going to get there so that we know really what came from, because right now we're in this gray zone.
I know,
you
right, right.
Yeah.
You guys think we're gonna ask you
We
guys.
don't know.
Right,
We don't know.
right, you don't know, but we're gonna ask you, and then we're gonna say, this is the vote, and then enough people are gonna come up out of the woodwork that you don't know that say yes, and then bam,
But we want to be realistic, and we
Right.
just need clarity.
I know, so, right.
where you're landing. Yeah.
right, it's too much.
Thank you.
Option 1's too much,
Thank you.
option 2's too much,
Yep.
option 3 is too much.
Thank you.
So this is where we,
That is very
Sorry, and I
good.
think that brings me back to what I was trying to say about Truex proposals. We paid $130,000 to an architect firm to give us 3 proposals that are financially not feasible.
right, so,
Like we haven't gotten what we wanted from that firm, and that's where I was like, what? They gave us a proposal based on what criteria? Like, we now have a product that we can't use.
So I just want to tag in.
okay.
I just want to say. I just wanna
Okay,
say
so
that.
before, we're here to let you, so thank you, and
Yeah.
continue.
So I'm glad you brought up the synopsis of all you did. Thank you. That's very helpful. And it does take you through exactly how we got here. And it also kind of shows that, okay, you're clearly going through the exploration process of what you need. Oh my God, this is worse than thought. And so you got the numbers pulled together, but it wasn't until more recently in the last month or two that we knew the actual tax impact.
Right.
And that's why obviously there's so many
Mhm.
here.
Sure.
It's not only, we want the best thing for our children. We want to make sure we're complying with state laws and everything. But, you know, when we got to the 75 and then this will be bid out, you know, it's almost like we put the cart before the horse and said, here's 75 million, you're going to vote on this. And by the way, a third of it or whatever, 32% of it, you're going to pay this much. So now we're starting to understand the numbers and saying, hang on, this is not feasible. So what I was looking at our November 15th meeting minutes was that there were several ideas bounced around, and one of which was some modular units. And I looked back through the meeting minutes back in 2019, and it was actually brought up. I don't know if Dave Schilling, somebody had brought it up, but it wasn't explored further, and I was just curious as to why. But going back to the 15th meeting minutes, number 4, 5, and 6, I believe, and the options. Would like to ask if some of those can be explored or a motion made on the board or however that has to happen to have those costs be explored, because clearly the 75 million, we would want the best, but we can't afford the best.
So,
We're a small
I
town,
hear what you're asking, but let me get if I can ask a clarifying question.
but
So is your point that we should just consider going out and identifying opportunities for some modular classrooms and not worry about anything else?
no, that identifies, no, so
Okay.
let me go back to that. Your space, need for space, what
Yeah.
we're saying is use the high school wing for that, do modulars or some other configuration, do modulars for additional space. As far as the makeup of the 32 million to 36 million that has to be done in their types, in their phase 1 or, you know, based on the law, what we're hearing, there's some that has to be done, you know, but I guess when we get to that point, you know, my question would be, there were 2 other firms involved. At what point could we invite our number 2 to come in and?
Do you want to spend another $130,000?
No, I don't want to spend
$130,000
$130,000, but I will tell you, if I go to the bank and say, my house is full of toxic mold, And my new home that I want to build is $2 million. The bank's gonna ask for multiple bids. And did you have this vetted out? Because we're looking here and based on this, we're not feeling like it should be. And also you look at per capita being a small town. I mean, I'm talking to people in Essex and they're like laughing at us right now.
So just to be clear, we went through a bid process before we selected Shortstone. We got proposals from 3 firms. And they gave us prices, and Truex was not the most expensive of the 3. I don't remember the sequence of it. The recommendation from the administration was based primarily on reputation and experience of the firm, and they were in the middle of the price. We had, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's 3 years ago, okay? But they were selected based on their reputation and experience with doing school buildings. Truex designed the Winooski School renovation. Okay, they did a renovate and expand in place because they don't have land. They would have built on a new site if they had an open piece of land, and they would have had a cheap, probably a cheaper construction project and a less disruptive construction project, because they not only were they renovating in place, they were doing it in the midst of COVID. And they went through 2.5 or almost 3 years of disruption of the school environment as they built. This is roughly what they did. They built 2 new wings. They did that first. Then they moved some kids out of the old space into the new wings. They renovated, they moved those kids back. They moved other kids in to the new space, renovated their space, moved them back. They had multiple cycles of doing that. And it took them almost 3 years. I think they're done now. I think if you drive by that school on, I think it's Main Street, or maybe it's Christie Avenue. I think it looks like I don't think the cranes are there anymore. They've been there for 3 years. And I know people that worked in that building and taught in that building during that period.
So I guess back to my question is, since we all clearly realize the cost of the new building is excessive, I just asked that some of these other options be explored.
Okay. So I'm gonna go to Molly next, and then I'm gonna go to Dave, and then
I'm just gonna say what I heard you say, Lance, and having a formal process to talk about other options other than the ones that are over 60 million is what sounds like you were asking about. Is are we gonna have a process to discuss those? And I think having some structure and a formal process to do that would be helpful. There's been a lot of different ideas, and it could be a way of identifying what information we have, what we don't have. And so we're all on the same page about why some may not work too. And we can point back to the discussion and say, we talked about that, we looked at that. But I have heard some creative ideas that I think it's worth having some sort of formal structure around talking about those. It would be helpful for sure.
Dave, we'll go to Dave.
For your point, you raised it twice. We hired them to come in and say, these are all your problems, okay? So once they came up with a list, instead of just saying, these are your problems, you gotta fix them. It's, well, how do we fix them? And then that's where they came up with the options of, you can fix it, you can add, or you can do an whole new school. But for the list of problems for $64,000, and then however much it was to finish the project, I don't know if we need a second opinion on what the problems are, because if copper pipes are 55 years old, and they have a certain solder in them, which the lifespan, or it's not in code anymore, I don't think we need to hire somebody else for a second opinion to tell us, yeah, that's right. So once the list of problems has been identified in a 200-page document, where we go from there is, in my mind, is possible.
Yeah.
We don't need to hire somebody.
Yeah.
What's that?
So that's one of the reasons, though,
Does that
that I
answer your
wanted to
question?
show you, that I want to show you all the independent corroboration from the state. where they came in and did their own investigation, and they probably just sat in a room and looked at the age of the things that have been installed, but based on pulling permits. This is this old, this is this old, this is this old, to give you an idea that the numbers sort of match. And so we have to certainly do a degree, a corroboration of the data that is in our needs assessment from the state in their assessment of our building that happened as well. That's why I was showing you that thing that is, and that, again, you can go through and look at that one on your own. Right.
Thank you. And I do appreciate this extra story and everyone's. So how I'm visualizing this is all pre-construction, right? It's a scoping statement. You're trying to figure out the needs, prioritize it, 1, 2, 3s. Going through the report, each one says that it needs to be vetted further and further investigation of details to really drill down on the real true price and cost and ramification and level, right? Each one of those. So there's more work that needs to be done in order to actually get the scope of work and something that can be bid out. Now, is the architect going to be doing the whole project? Is this a design build, or is this something that they're going to put plans together to bid out to another contracting?
That one.
That one.
Yeah, they don't build. Rex Cullen doesn't build.
So they don't do a design build. They're not going to partner with a contractor.
No. Well,
But
I guess the devil's in the details. So
No,
they're not a single firm that can design something and then they have their own carpenters to put it together.
right.
They will make recommendations. The actual construction phase, if we get to that, will be put out to bid. And Rex Cullen will have some responsibility for helping to guide us through that process, but they don't have a stake in the actual construction. They're not getting, they essentially stop getting paid when they have a final design that they can give to, I don't know who the contractors are that can build something in Vermont, but they'll give a design and then they'll have some responsibility in working with a construction company to make sure that they're staying in compliance with the design and answer technical questions around the design, but it'll be a separate contractor actually doing the construction.
So in other words,
Wait, hold on. Let me finish.
yeah, so sorry.
Okay. So what we have here, thank you, that does clarify what we're trying to do. So we're still in that pre-construction side, trying to figure out really it's triangle, right? You got your scope, what's going to happen. You got your costs. Still, we're trying to figure that out, and the time. But we also have the quality, right? Quality is the factor because that will affect all three, and all of them will affect each other. So I think what's happening here is we're saying cost hasn't been determined. The time, we know there's some constraints on the time because of school, and we got to figure it out between seasons and such. And we don't still know the scope. You really don't know the scope yet. Not yet. You have you have a conceptual design right now.
So, yeah, we don't
all
have,
agree
we
on
don't
that.
have concrete plans, right? We don't have concrete plans.
Well, right, you have nothing that can go out to bid.
Right.
So we still have work that needs to be done to get to that point.
Yeah, there's,
Right.
and there's a cost to that. There's
The
a
cost of
There is a
doing that
cost
work
to
is built into the estimate. So if the 70 million or 75 or whatever it is, that includes money for them to complete a design that can be built. That is built into that estimate.
But why not?
Why-
That's
why?
pre-construction, so why wouldn't they get it all the way up to design phase to be advertised for constructability? And then you can monitor the construction costs. You'll have them help you do the quality assurance of this project, right? And I hear what they're gonna do. They're gonna help you be that person, right, that will help make sure that the.
They'll work with a contractor.
Right.
Is that clerk of the works? Is that how much the run?
What's
That's
that?
a-
Well,
that's
there's a
that's-
whole nother, there's a whole nother. All right, let me try it this way. I understand what you're trying to get to, but
Yeah, I'm just
All right,
trying to
so-
parse out where we
so
still have a lot
let's
more
just talk-
things to go,
let's
right?
talk about the make good and the expansion. Okay, let's pick those. All right, let's take the $70 million number, okay? 'Cause everybody-
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It
It's a
applies,
project.
it applies.
It's a project.
Built into that $70 million number is a cost for the architect to finish, to go from conceptual to here's a design that can be built. So it's much more detailed, obviously, okay? There is built into that estimate, there is an estimate of construction costs, and the estimates are based on square footage estimates to build a school building, okay? I don't remember what the number is, but it's, you know, it's a couple $100 a square foot to build this kind of a building. It's probably a little bit more than that. There are contingencies built into that number for inflation, for material cost inflation, and the contingencies that were built in reflect, because of the time they were done, they reflect the current situation where all of a sudden, and Lance will know about this, the supply chain issues with building materials and how much building materials went from down here up to here. That was factored in. So they included an even bigger contingency, because you're always going to run into something that you don't know. And if you've ever built a house, you know what that's like, right? Okay, if you've been through that or renovated a house, they always find something that you didn't know was there. That's all built into those numbers already. So it's not like there's I mean, it's a big number, but it's not like there's all this other stuff on the outside that we got to worry about either. Is that estimate 100% accurate? No, it's not. We'll have a better, but we'll have a better idea when we have a design. And because they built contingencies into those estimates, they are saying to us that we are comfortable that we can design this project and get a contractor to build it in this price.
That's your estimate, right?
Right, but I mean, you know, this is, you know, if I went out myself, if I wanted to build my own, if I wanted to build a house and I went out and tried to figure out what it was going to cost, I'd mess it up. All right, I go to a reputable contractor, and they're going to start off and say, well, you know, the building costs in the Danville area for a private home, I don't know what it is now, maybe, you know, Korea, but you know, $150 a square foot, you know, to build a decent house now, okay? And so you say, well, I want a 2,000 square foot house. So they're going to say, that's $300,000 to build, okay? But then you get into the actual construction part, and you're going to pay something less or something more than that, right? And that's been I built a couple houses in an earlier time in my life, and I had that experience. I had one that came in under what was estimated, and I had one that came in a little bit over.
And so I think that's my point, is
Yeah.
that because the scope is not final, and we're still in the pre-construction stage, and we're still in the scoping stage, this would be a great opportunity to explore the other opportunities of being able to solve the problem. And that is what we need to know, is what problem are you trying to solve? Like, we've got to nail that down.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things that are being thrown out, priority 1, priority 2, space, all sorts of stuff. It's like, oh, it all fits, right? But sometimes, what are the project constraints? We need constraints on
Right,
this too.
what are the things that we have to do?
What are the, what are the things we have to do, and what are the
That's the
things that
question we
we
want
can't
to
do?
know. What do we have to do?
Right.
And, but you,
How much is it gonna
right, so what do we have to do? And then, but you guys find fault with the veracity of the report.
No, okay,
Yeah.
hold on.
This is the question I need answered back
So
from
I
you
will
guys,
just,
please.
a firm can only give you an answer based on what your ask is. I have no doubt that Truex Collins report is accurate and the veracity is true. They are giving you what you asked for. The problem is you didn't have a specific ask. You didn't give them a budget that their proposal had to fall within. So they're going to tell you everything that should be done. You didn't tell them. That's the problem. And so I'm not saying that if you came back to Truex Collins tomorrow and said, okay, it's changed. You got a lot of priorities here, but the truth is we can't do them. It's just absolutely not going to happen.
Right.
Our budget is $20 million.
Right.
I guarantee you some of those things are going to fall off the priority 1 list. Does that mean they weren't a priority 1 before? No, it just means that when they had $75 million to play with, they were a priority one. When you tell them all they got is 20 million, well, then you look at the priorities in a different way. And that's what I'm getting at is where is the part where we stepped in and said, these can't all be priorities. Let's shift this around. What is the budget we have to work within? And the unfortunate thing is that you paid them $130 without a clear direction. I don't think they did a bad job. I think they gave you the report they needed to give you. They didn't have the guidance they needed. And now we're at a point where what they've given you isn't functional. And we have to go back and give them some other guidance or get someone else who can come in. Maybe it's just a third-party facilitator who knows construction, who can actually look at the data that's there and say, okay, what do we really need to tease out of this? And pull out the things that really need to be teased out and go from there. I'm not saying we need to get a second architect or a second opinion, but we can't use what they gave us. And we need some other guidelines.
So there is one more bite at the apple for this board for figuring this out. If we can agree on what direction we're going in. And that is in the final design. And I'm going to give you an analogy, which is, and I don't want to consider Cal Rec because this isn't true. But if you look at their conceptual design, and if they're in their conceptual design, they had a koi pond and a marble staircase, we would say we don't want the koi pond and the marble staircase. Take that out. That would not be in the final design. That would save us some money. I don't think we're going to cut this. I know you're trying to make a point about the differential. We're not going to cut it from 70 to 20. But what if we could cut another $5 to $8 million off of it by simplifying the design? You're still going to say no.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that's the threshold, right? When we talk about the project constraints, it's what is the project cost? What's the limit?
And you don't even have agreement on what your constraint is.
But
Some
it
of you think
seems like
35 is too many,
also-
and you think 75 is enough. 75 is acceptable. We don't even have agreement on what our budget is among the schools.
Well,
How can we do a project?
and I think that what I'm trying to get at here is if the needs assessment is great. It really highlighted and shined a lot of things that have deficiencies. But it also was a high level assessment. Most of the things that were in that report said they needed additional information to make an accurate assessment of the information. You know that, I read it.
Mhm. A lot of times, I mean, they need to take a wall down. What
Well.
they mean is the wall's got to be down so they can
They
see how
said
bad.
that they haven't looked at it, they need some more stuff, or we're not sure. There's a lot of it was high level, and that's okay. That helped assess like a general, here you go. This is a lot of building to assess,
It is.
right? There's a lot of things, or they're trying to, figure it all out and give you a high level. The next level is to drill down on each one of those, and then to take and make conceptual plans, and then make
Well, I think
draft
the only
plans,
thing we need to
preliminary
drill down
plans,
on, I just want
plans.
to say, is the
We've got a
36
lot.
million. I just want to make sure, like, if we're all in agreement already that 75 million is out, option 1 or option 2 and 3 are out. If we're at option 1, what we need to drill down on, in my opinion, is what within option 1 is priority 1, and how can we get there and make that number more reasonable? 32 to 36 mil is still hitting every single one of us way too hard. So now it's like, if we're all in agreement on that, and I don't know, I'm just putting it out there, then how do we move forward for the next step? I think that really becomes the plan of what is our action at this point to look into 36 million, make good. What do we have to have happen there? What is the priority for the kids and space?
well.
I have a question. I really think the board needs to have a meeting amongst yourselves and really think of this one question. There are many, many Danville kids over the years who've gone to the academy, who've gone to LI, or other places, wherever they wanted to, pay for high school. And I'm not saying that something needs to be done, but you could take half that budget that you have there. I've heard Stacy give one about a huge high school that was built for a lot less money than we're talking here, for like 800 students. For like, California of all places, so their rules would be,
Recently,
Yeah, 2021.
It was a modular.
Yeah.
right?
it was unbelievable.
Has no interior hallways.
No, it did.
Yeah, 3-story and everything.
Two stories.
2-story, okay. So anyway, so my point is, you could take something like Stacy's from pre-K through middle school and really put the emphasis that this area needs on those. And you could give choice to the high school, because you don't need to reinvent the apple. There's good tech programs at both those schools. Both those schools can offer 10 times more than this high school could ever offer to your students. And I'm sorry, and I'm not saying one thing against any teacher here, principal, or anything.
Thank you for that.
But we asked
Does
you, did you guys even talk about it? We asked you
It was
last
talked
meeting to
about,
check
it was-
into it.
it was discussed.
No, we asked last meeting to talk about it. In between last meeting and this meeting.
We're not allowed to talk about things in between meetings.
No, we asked you guys to talk to us about the idea of going back to choice. In the meeting notes, you can find that. We asked you that. Did you talk about it, and what's your response on that issue?
We didn't talk about it because we don't have those conversations outside of the meeting.
Yeah, they have.
We
We can't, like,
can't meet
we
in
can't
private.
go, we can't go someplace and sit in the room and talk amongst ourselves. That's not legal.
I think it goes back to the having a process to,
That's what I'm saying. Did you even, I guess my point is, can you give us a response in that somehow, so that we can find out what the school board's, have you even investigated? That's my question.
That's what I was trying to answer before. This was looked into last summer. There was a meeting in July. The administration was tasked with looking at what would be the financial impact on the school district if we closed the high school.
can we get a
I
copy?
personally don't. Okay, come on.
Can we get a copy of that? You must have
It's
run
in-
numbers
it's in-
somewhere.
Yeah, I think Mark, what people have asked for is just more clarity on the assumptions that were made to calculate the numbers.
Yeah, I
I think
mean,
that would be, that's what I've been
it's
hearing from people is.
it's
wanting
in the
to know.
minutes.
Well-
We submitted a report to the board and discussed it at the board, and the board discussed
Yes. we
the
did, yeah.
option and decided not to move forward.
But is that after we knew that you're potentially gonna be building a $75 million
It was
school?
before the impact information.
So that needs to be
It was before the
reinvestigated.
tax impact. So one thing I can tell you from July, from that analysis of July, was the financial impact on the district was an additional 23 cents on the tax rate, close to high school. And I know that some of you are gonna roll your eyes, you do not believe that it's more expensive to tuition kids out to high school than to operate high school.
Who did-
I'm not saying, that's not a question of whether choice is the right thing or not, but there is a financial impact on the district. And I've seen this in every school district I've worked in.
I'm actually more concerned with Danville taxpayers than I am about someone in Peachum.
I'm not talking about Peachum, I'm talking
You
about.
said
Danville.
district.
This is a district. Danville is its own district. I'm not talking about the whole SU. I'm not talking about all 7 schools. This is a terminology thing.
Is there
Danville is a
link to that
school
information?
district by itself, a standalone municipal district. So when I say district, I'm talking about the school. And it would cost the Danville taxpayers, based on the analysis that was done in July, if we shut the high school down this year, the tax rate would have been an additional 23 cents.
So how does that work? And we were told at the last meeting that we tuition kids in at $18,000 a year.
Yeah, so that's a pretty, I could explain that if you had.
Tuition our kids out there?
No, it's gonna cost us more.
How?
Because there's,
They charge more.
They charge more.
They charge more because
Because they offer.
they're not public. They're
Same
private.
thing,
You say,
Academy and LI charges $21,000, rounded, $21,000 a year for a student. That's their tuition rate at those two.
Right, but you don't pay that. You only pay your town's per pupil rate.
When you run a school.
No,
Tuition.
no, no, that's not right. Quinn. Sorry, we have to, if we send a student, tuition a student out, we write a check for that.
So
To
there are
that
a
other
lot of students who go out of state. There are a lot of students who go out of country. for
We
high
have to
school
pay
and
the
for long-
tuition rate
I know that you do not pay the full tuition
That's
rate.
not, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. I don't mean to be rude, but
That's not true.
you're incorrect.
I think the
There's
bigger,
there's two different things that I think you're mixing up here. For public schools, if we closed the high school and a student said, I want to go to Oxbow, what we would pay to Oxbow, because it's a public high school, is the average statewide tuition for public high schools in Vermont, okay? If that same student says, I want to go to St. John Career Academy, they get to charge us whatever they decide their tuition is. And so if Oxbow is $18,000 because that's the statewide average, St. J Academy is going to charge us 21.
And that even applies if their town doesn't have a high school, like that just doesn't even matter. It's just, there's not like a special deal given to a local, like a Vermont town without a high school.
No.
I'm just curious. I don't know.
Not
It's the
from a
same
private school.
thing, it's the same thing that happens for Peachum, Barnett, Walden,
They all pay
and
whatever.
Waterford. They pay that rate. They pay 21, they're up to $21,000 a year per student, and those are different districts.
But what I'm saying is, the kid wanted to go down to Phillips Exeter Academy.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's say, because they'd be a boarding student, they're gonna be charged $60,000 a
Yeah.
year. Okay, Danville wouldn't pay $60,000.
No, we would pay to Phillips Exeter in that example, we would pay whatever the Vermont state tuition average is.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what we're saying.
Right, but that doesn't cap what we have to pay St. John's Fair Academy or LI, because they have a carve out in statute that says we pay full tuition.
Okay, so to those two schools, that's different.
Right.
But
The
then
analysis-
it's parents' choice of where they have to pay the difference of $2,000.
So was the analysis done?
No, that's not
assuming-
true. No,
Sorry,
no,
was the analysis then done? When you're saying that the reason that it would cost us more to tuition students out is that we have to pay more to the academy and to LI than we put to this. So are you saying then that the analysis that was done during that report was making the assumption that all the kids would go to a more expensive school, to the academy and LI?
Well, but the other part of that too is we're still upkeeping the building. That's the other part of it. We haven't.
Being torn down.
For all the
How
students,
many
they
high
pay
school
for space.
teachers do you have?
Well, no, you're right.
That was part of the
You're
original.
saying we still haven't escaped the
We're still
building.
saying that you have to
So
share.
that's why the cost doesn't decrease as much as we would love
Well,
it.
the cost would only, it wouldn't decrease, but you would have space to spread K through 8 out.
You would.
there
I got
and
that.
not
I got
have to
this.
build a building.
Because with the building, when they closed the high school, it would be one thing if the high school was its own building. Close the high school, that means that, shut the water off, shut off the electricity for this place here.
No, you move middle school into high school.
But if we have, we send the high school students out and we can expand into where the high school is now, then you're not looking at a true number, because now you are having to hire more teachers to expand your elementary program, and you are opening those rooms and heating those rooms, cleaning those rooms and stuff like that. So there's a number that's
You would be doing that
But in your
anyway.
new
and
proposal, they're gonna do
right. We're talking about with school choice, you can't make the building disappear with no cost.
10 rooms and have 10 more teachers. That's because that's what you're saying. So whatever board is saying that we need more space. If you have more space with more rooms, that means you need more pupils watching kids.
It sounds like we would actually need a real analysis of what would drop-in costs be and what would the extra amount. be
So-
paid out.
So just strictly in terms of the close of high school, that was all factored in. We factored in salary, comp and ben savings from needing fewer teachers, because we wouldn't have high school faculty, okay, in the building anymore if the high school wasn't operating. We made some assumptions on reduced transportation, but it doesn't, you don't get to cut bus routes in the town, because people are still scattered around Danville. They're probably still running a number of buses. We did make the assumption, and we disclosed this, that most of the kids, because most of the kids would end up at LI or St. John's Academy. Some of them wouldn't, but most of them would, okay? And they do get to charge 21,000, doesn't matter what the statewide high school tuition average is, they get to charge whatever they want. They went up 9% last year, they had it, okay?
And
And
who
I-
did the analysis, just out of curiosity, you said
My
yourself?
finance director,
Who was it? I'm sorry.
my finance director.
Okay. the guy
Okay,
yourself.
and how many of those students that you're talking about, the high school students, we're saying, are Danville residents?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because the other piece of the cost differential is we're bringing in about
Revenue.
$800,000 a year from students from other towns who come here, who paid for by their towns to attend Danville School.
But that's middle schoolers too.
Huh? And some middle schoolers, but
Yes,
we looked at the number of high school students tuitioned in. We were only looking at FY20 the current year, so, it's gonna fluctuate. But in FY23, how many kids we expected to have tuitioned in to high school? That's worth about $800,000. If the high school wasn't here, that's revenue that we don't receive.
but you only have 100 high school students here.
But do you count the students that you tuition out?
Yeah, we counted that, and we counted the loss of revenue for the students that we can't bring in.
So when you tuition, I just want to make sure, what happens to the? So if you have students that don't stay there, you should keep their money.
If you have students that what?
Yes.
Say that again?
I didn't get that.
I don't understand it.
She's saying that
Somebody else decided to go to a different. school.
Yeah, it would be a little bit cheaper if you had 10% of the kids that chose to go to one of the public schools.
No, but I'm just saying that 800,000 isn't really a fair number, because those students aren't all high school students.
No, that is high school, no.
You only have 100 high school students.
125.
All right, so it's something in there, I don't have the
I think
report.
the bigger,
How many of them?
So, last year, the number that it was based on was
We
780.
had about 40 kids.
with 40 tuition kids out of the 125.
So now you're
But all
down
40 of those
to
kids weren't tuition.
85 students. 85.
Something like that,
Danville
something in there,
students.
85, 90 who are Danville residents, that
Okay.
we would then be paying tuition to some other school to educate. And we would not have the $800,000 in revenue coming to us from the other towns. The tax rate in Danville, if we were not accepting any tuition students and operating the high school, would be quite a bit more than what we pay. Danville benefits from the fact that it will attract students into Danville High School who do not want to attend one of the academies, one of the more expensive academies.
Quick question. I'm just curious, I like Molly's idea of allowing you guys to kind of in your next meeting or whenever to be able to kind of figure out how you'll construct the way that you come together, whether involve us or yourselves initially to come up with some ideas, like what can we whittle down, or what other ideas can we put out there to reduce the impact from a cost standpoint, still achieve our space goals and
Sure. Well, we can have that conversation, but we will not be having it in a private meeting. It'll be in a public session.
yeah, well, that's
So half,
That's what I
half of
mean.
you're gonna show up, and so it's not like you can go off in a corner and put our head together.
I understand.
But it seems
What I'm
like
saying
sort of-
is,
Yeah.
We don't
So-
get
so
to
what
do
I'm saying
that.
is like our meeting tonight is more of a special one where we can have more dialogue, and whereas a normal one, we're kind of closed off, we'll wait for public discussion. What I'm saying is
Yeah.
one of those normal things where, yes, we could be here, but
All right.
But
Well,
Mike's
let's clarify
question-
this. If we were gonna have, I get your point, and I don't think it's a bad idea, but in order for this board to have that conversation, they would have to warn that for discussion, and then you all could come and you would all have the opportunity. This is what we're doing tonight. We're having a special meeting of the board. The only agenda item that's warned is this discussion, and we're having a very lively, and I think a respectful and interesting conversation about the challenge. We could do that in another meeting, but it's the idea that this board is going to get to go off somewhere in a corner and put the collective heads together is not going to
Yeah,
happen.
I'm not sure, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's maybe the way I'm communicating.
Okay,
It seems kind of adversarial, and I don't mean it to be.
Okay.
I'm simply asking as a way of moving forward. We're kind of, kind of getting at a lot of good things. It's been very constructive. What I'm saying is how do we formalize it over the next months so that instead of continuing to come and say, wow, the pipes suck, or this is old, or how do we get to a point where we constructively organize it and an action?
So we were also hoping to get to a point where we can start discussing what we can actually do. We
Yeah.
started already the process of discussing what we can actually do while we were waiting on the tax impact with the information that we had. And then we decided that we would put together the advisory group of willing volunteers. And that's who was in the advisory group was willing volunteers. The man who just left here has been on the process for whatever, Rob Alavic, for
Yeah.
several years. He's an architect. He built schools in Alaska. And he came on very early. And so he was really the genesis of the idea that this is what we need is an advisory group of the citizens so that we can have people's names associated with it that will come in and ask these questions in a session like you're talking about, where, where you're not saying, so where it's not the five of us talking and then you got to wait your turn and you got to hold your hand up and then I got to identify you and then it's, but in a place where the board sits with, or at that time, it was just only 2 board members could be there because it's an advisory group and it was not binding. So what we ended up with there was a group that was doing what you're talking about, but then they can't decide the money. That's not the way it works. Ultimately, the money gets decided by the board. So when you give them the money discussion, you got to pull that back. So if we're going to have those again, we would probably have to have those with the board assembled and then have other people in the room that are either in a group that we are listening to or on a committee.
I have a recommendation that I understand the reasoning around not making a financial decision. I'm wondering if the advisory group could meet and we set a limit of whatever the board sets for exploring options under a certain amount. And if they need financial information, that has to go through the board to request from the administration or to request from Director Cullen, and just set more parameters that are helpful rather than restrictive. I don't know if the group would be willing to
It
come back.
seems like that's the page we're on, like we would absolutely, I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but be interested in being a part of what is a real solution. Like that's what we need to do right now. We need to look at.
want to.
We need to look at.
I sound belligerent, but I really want a solution. I just don't want, I don't want my neighbors or myself or people actually be forced to sell their homes out to get out of it.
I think that we need to kind of come to start out at the 32 million. And figure out what we need to do and then go from there and see how far we can come down and still live.
And that doesn't necessarily address the space issue that I know
That's
started out at the party, but what I would say is there have been some conversations. Stacey took a lot of time to dive into what are the modular options, what could we do? So I think we sort of have 2 pieces that we're looking at with regards to how do we whittle it down to safety, welfare, et cetera. Like those are top priorities, health, children, you guys there. And then obviously the space issue. But I think if we can start to explore that together, then we could probably come up with something pretty awesome that could work and not stress us all out about I have to move.
Something else I think that Stacy told us the concept on a school in California that was just finished being built in 2021. Why don't you tell them what the costs were? Because that will shock them to hear what that.
It's still too much money, but it's a lot.
Well,
better than-
But for the number of students,
Well-
it's like it shows you how much out of whack it is.
well, I guess, and I appreciate it. And
Sorry.
no, that's okay. And I was trying to,
Next week too.
I was trying not to because I want to not agree to any numbers because we really, this all started with 3 classrooms and food service. And now we are renovating or tearing down an entire building to start over again. And I think that if that's your immediate need right now, how do we address that? Do we get portables right now so that you can continue to get and capture tuition? So that you can continue to get preschoolers or whoever you decide to put in those temporary or permanent modules, whatever. And use your surpluses that way so you can solve your problem with what you have immediately right now today. So you don't lose students. That's a big deal, right? Then now you can take your time on how do you address the costs? Are they all going to be 100% bonded? Or do we look for funding? Do we look for granting? Do we try and do a matching of a capital budget to it? Like, what's our options here? What's the level of approvals do we need on those? Is it 50% or 60% on bonding? That's going to be the magic pass fail. Like, what are these things that we're talking about? Like, we've got to structure how we're going to go through this process and what is our non-negotiables. Right now, we haven't determined what that non-negotiable project cost is. We're throwing numbers around like we have 30.
But like we're gonna, yeah, I know, like we're major construction.
Like I just, I'm doing a big giant project. I'm doing a huge project right now for the state. And it's huge. I'm going to rebuild a whole big giant bridge, interstate, all sorts of crazy stuff for 30 million. And I can't imagine, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but we're not doing it alone. We can't do it alone.
Right.
So why are we trying to do it alone as the Danville residents? Doesn't make sense to me. So
Well,
we need, hold on, I understand and I hear you, but we need to, if we have to buy our time and address an immediate need, let's look for those immediate needs.
So can I call that one rhetorical? Because we're sort of going in circles here. And what I'd like to do here, if it's possible, let me call that one rhetorical and bring this bit of a discussion to a close, because we've gotten to where we're talking in circles, and you guys are talking amongst yourselves as much as you're talking to us, and that's fine. And so on today, we've sort of circled around some things, and
So here is my ask. I really want you to withdraw going forward on the $75 million project. It's off the table. We need to have it off the table. We can't get it past what we're doing. We need to bring it all back so that we can start. Now you have some information. You have your needs assessment. You can start now figuring out what another advisory group can do. You're helping frame the project and putting boundaries on it. And that's great. That's exactly what you needed for this needs assessment. So the money's not lost. So what I want to do though, pull that back. We
Okay.
need to commit to that because
on
we're going to
today,
kill our.
I can't make motion.
That's fine.
So-
I'm putting it out there. However.
I know, I hear you. I hear you.
No,
On today, I'm not one for action. So I
Can you
can't-
get that put on an agenda promotion?
The
How would
next-
we request that for next?
next meeting.
Okay, can we do that? Would be great. And
So
the other thing, I'm sorry, just really quickly,
Oh, okay.
from a space issue, because I keep coming back to the space as being a factor for you guys, and I know, again, we talked like 90, there were 450, and education, et cetera, has changed, and I respect that, et cetera. But I'm just wondering, has there been, or is there easily able to be an assessment on all of the services that are being provided through the school? Like if the services were to be like, say, the modular, like this is something obviously we can maybe get into, but I'm just wondering, does that exist? Do you guys know like this much space would need to happen for speech, for PT, et cetera, et cetera? That just might help us move it forward with like what space we're looking at. I just wanted to throw that out there. But obviously the first thing is if we can get a vote, like you're saying, to knock down the 75 million bill not happening, I think we'd also be a lot more comfortable with that.
all right, so
So as a text,
So-
can I request you put that on the next agenda?
So-
How does that?
we have one next week. That we have a meeting next week. It's our regular meeting where we're not going to talk about the school. We're going to talk about the regular business of the school besides this. But when we schedule our next meeting of this, then I think, yeah, we can have that on the agenda. We talk about that.
Do you need an email on that, or will that just come internally with you guys?
So I set the agendas.
Perfect. I didn't know if you needed a public request on it.
No, I could actually, if I wanted to, I could ignore them.
Okay,
You
gotcha.
could say to me, I want you to put this
I
on the
didn't know
agenda.
what was
I could
there.
say, thank you for your email.
Okay, cool.
So in that case, I could say thank you. for your email. But so,
Go back to you again, okay? We came we asked them for, you know, what's the list of our problems, okay? And you're right, we didn't say, what are the problems? And what, you know, about being fixed, money's not an option. You're right. When it came, I'm thinking maybe 15 million, 20 million, when it came up with this number, I was just floored. But you're right, we did not say, your question was, did you set a limit? No, we didn't. We didn't set a limit.
Thank you. And I think that's a big part of the problem, like in any, I've done enough construction and renovation projects that know if a firm wants to do a good job, but they're only gonna give you what you ask for.
I mean, who would have dreamed it would have been 75 million?
We didn't,
Right.
dream- we didn't dream that
Nobody.
when we started.
We're shocked. And Marty, if we get together, everybody in this room for a cut list, I certainly don't have knowledge on, we can save $50,000 if we go with this linoleum instead of the other one. You know,
I
you're,
just went through this with the client yesterday on the phone.
Yep.
I had to give him an estimate, he's in New Jersey. I gave him numbers on the figures on his remodel we're doing. And I said, I budgeted 10 grand per kitchen. You can go 5 or you can go 50. There's a huge difference. I said, I budgeted 5,000 for each bath, fixture, and toilets and showers. You can go high end, you can go low end, or you can go medium. I went medium. So we set a figure that we're comfortable with, he's comfortable with, and I said, yes, I think I can come within that. And he said, okay, let's get started.
and we've had to hire somebody that knows how to do that because none of us know how to do that.
Because we don't know the codes.
That's right. I think I would appreciate that being a motion, because I think as long as we have that on the table as part of the discussion, it just muddies the water and causes divisive. It's just needs to be taken off the table so we can be a realistic starting.
So I think all we've had is the advisory group make a recommendation
Based on
and not that this is a recommendation and the board has to decide and have to do nothing.
No, but it has, so it brings me to but what has happened is there's a Google site presenting to the community that this is the recommendation, and notifying the community that there will at some point be a vote on this, and then putting together a video trying to promote this. I feel like while I don't doubt that the information per se is accurate in Truex Cullen's report, I do feel that there is some conflict of interest in knowing that their contracted scope of work does not stop here, that they are contracted, that their scope of work would continue on with the construction project and the build. They are going to get more money if it moves forward, because then they're going to be acting in a different capacity.
But
they're
it's not
still
a
gonna be
function of,
acting.
it's not a function of which option.
So they're still going to be acting in some
Move over to
capacity.
Tim.
I just want, we can't take any action tonight, but I think you can rest assured that in a perfect world, we would have a perfect, beautiful new school. And we all know that we don't live in that world, and we all live in town.
Right,
So
and so,
we can't take any action, but I think you hear me say that
thank
and
you.
know that we live here. And we don't want to be forced out either,
But I
so.
think moving forward, I think the other thing I would like us to consider, and maybe at the next meeting, is having a third party. And I don't want to spend a lot of money, but I do think we need someone to help guide us through this process that is not Truex Cullen. And I'm saying that because I do feel some conflict of interest, knowing their scope would continue on through the project.
What's an acceptable number?
For a budget, I can't,
No,
oh,
okay.
for like a.
So
To hire somebody for a second opinion, 30,000, okay? You're not gonna find anybody.
Wait, I mean,
You
to
will.
go through,
Might
to,
be consultant hired,
to
or-
go through their
I
report
don't
and
know that.
determine if their priority one is all priorities one, like that?
Yeah, like we have to. So I think there's for example, one of the priority ones is the gym, the bleacher system.
It's been replaced, right?
And it says that it's nearing its serviceable life. And the report says, and this is my memory, so don't quote me on this, it's nearing its serviceable life, the end of its serviceable life. What does serviceable life mean? Does that mean that's what so it nearing at the end of its serviceable life, the athletic director has reported that that it sometimes malfunctions and might be a safety issue. And then it says the backboard, the retractable backboard for the basketball has not been assessed. However, knowing how old it is, we assume it too is nearing its functional life. And therefore our recommendation is that the entire bleacher system and backboard be replaced based on the fact that it's old and the athletic director said that it malfunctions sometimes.
So,
So
have you been
I'm
to the
sorry,
gym?
hold on just a minute. So my point
Mhm.
is that I think someone else needs to go through this a little bit. Personally, I don't think we need to replace the bleacher system based on that information.
Well, we
That's
already
what-
did.
We had somebody get injured, and because of the system malfunction.
And so if it was like a serious malfunction, but the report is just saying that, and I feel like there are items, there's plenty of stuff in there that doesn't feel like, does that really have to be replaced? Because it's,
I changed the cables on back.
and maybe that one did.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the cables fall. So, yeah, take it back where it's at, so I suggested changing the cable at the time. And we did.
And I don't know that system, I'm just saying, I recall that being in the report and seeing that that's a priority. We want to take data there. Right, and so a lot of this stuff can be done. So I just think that someone, if you guys are able to do that, or there's someone in the community that knows construction well enough to be on the advisory panel and help with that, that's fine, but I think that there does need to be someone to help facilitate that process.
I think that's kind of what I was asking for.
Hire a general contractor, trust their opinion. So now you're gonna give in and question your general contractor because they have alternatives, to capitalism, and they want to make a little more money. I mean, it seems like they're throwing money after money.
So we haven't yet hired a general contractor. So,
Well,
yeah.
No, her point, yeah.
so it makes sense to do it now rather than. what you
No, I'm
did.
saying facilitate the process of being able to help vet through the items. Right. And facilitate the process of trying to understand all the needs. And facilitate the process of helping match different people's ideas. Because different people can sit around and have a conversation and not actually get to anything in the end. A facilitator helps
We're there
that
now.
process.
Yeah, we're close to there
Right.
now, right?
And so a facilitator is, I'm not saying a facilitator just to come through and redo the work. I'm saying a facilitator help take the data that we have, help take what we had from the teachers. Everyone who has been involved in this process so far has their own interest, whether they're, and not saying it's bad, but I'm saying they have their own perspective that they're coming to this from. They're either a teacher or they're an architect who's going to make something on it, or they're an administrator who, like, everybody in this has their own perspective and their own interests. And a facilitator would be, their only job is to look at everyone's interest and everyone's perspective and try to find a way to marry those and come to a product in the end.
And
help direct that
Brenda,
process.
everything that you just said, I agree with 1000%. And that is the work that is done when you do the final design and you know what the community wants to move forward with. They're not going to hire a contractor based on a conceptual design. There will be an opportunity to carve things out that we don't think are necessary, like we don't need to replace the bleachers again because we just replaced them because they were unsafe. You know, those kinds of things that were identified 3 years ago that we couldn't wait on, they got taken care of. So we're not at the build stage, and there will be plenty of opportunity to take things out or simplify things,
But
or
who's
like,
going to decide what gets to be taken out? Who's going to decide what gets to
it will be a collaborative process with the architect. Just like it was done when they came into, when they came in, I forgot what they call visioning. When they came in and did visioning, and they had community members and a few faculty in here, but there were quite a few community members. What would you like to see in the school? What do you think is deficient? What would you like to see more of? Or what would you like to see change? So they didn't make that up. They didn't pull that out of the air. They pulled that from the visioning. So they did have community input.
So I hear you. I'm just gonna throw this out there to end this. of this piece of it. You have paid an architect to do this. You're wanting to continue and let them do this next phase without input from a facilitator.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I did not say that. I just told you, I agreed with you 1,000%.
I
With
thought we
everything
were-
that you just said, including your suggestion of a facilitator, that is part of the final design. That's how that's done.
And we would be putting it out to bid for the design work. Anyway, so Truex Collins wouldn't be guaranteed, that's my assumption, Truex Collins wouldn't be guaranteed for the design work, is that correct? That's what I thought, is that would be going up to bid.
Does the design go up to bid or just the contract, just the construction with whatever we get?
I suppose you could do it either way.
Then maybe that's.
I mean, there's, you know, there's, if you start fresh with somebody new, you're gonna repeat a lot of work.
I don't think you're gonna get a free, you may not get a free estimate on something this big.
But you still, I mean, you're still at a high level engineer inspector's report. I mean, you've got to feather out a lot of that stuff. You still haven't. I mean, there's still things that need to be further investigated and studied
Sure.
and programs.
That's,
Like it was throughout the whole entire report. So there's a lot of steps
the
still.
more, right, and then more information is needed here, more information is needed here.
Exactly. You're
and then
gonna
that
go
goes in the design,
conceptual, you're gonna go put preliminary plans. You've got a couple other sets of plans before you get to
Indeed.
final.
Indeed, we do. Indeed, we do. Okay, so now, I think today, we are done with this. We have two other items on our agenda that we're gonna get to next, and you're free to stay, and they're relevant to this. The next one, Molly wanted to talk about, I think we want to talk about the superintendent's recommendation, early to refocus the advisory group. This is the recommendation you made a few minutes ago.
Yeah, we never had a chance to talk about that before.
We didn't,
so-
it sort of blew up with the tax numbers. The tax numbers sort of derailed everything we do. So, would you like to go first?
No, I wanted to give Mark an opportunity to talk about it too, because we just read the same email that we sent to Clayton, so I think hearing it from you about your recommendation about the group would be helpful.
So what I presented to Clayton was my opinion that the advisory committee had been formed to look at options that the board asked them to consider. You know, 3 or 4 options that the board said, take a look at these, go out and gather community input. A lot of you, I wasn't at a lot, I think I went to one of those meetings. A lot of you were at those meetings, and I think a lot of people that are not here tonight were at other meetings and have had opportunity to give input. When I went to the advisory committee with the initial projection on the tax cost, the committee started going in a direction that they had not been asked to go in, which was I'm sorry, it's not a committee. The advisory group started delving into the financial issues, and that was not part of their charter. They were asked to look at to sample community impressions and to come back to the board and say, based on what the community is saying to us, we think that we think that you should just do the make good, or we think make good with a little bit of expansion, a new elementary wing, or possibly build a new building. There's pros and cons to doing those. Okay, we're not going to debate those again. I started hearing things. About certain people they were coming to the finance office saying, well, we want the finance office to vet all of our, answer all of our questions, to vet all this stuff again. And I said that's not an appropriate role for the finance office to be working with the advisory group, because they were not tasked with making the financial decisions. They were only tasked with coming back to the board and saying, based on what the community is saying, the community likes one of these options. Okay, that was it. That was the only assignment when the group was formed. So my suggestion to Clayton was that we asked them to refocus on what they were asked to do initially. Because if you form a group and you give them a task and then they start doing 5 other things that they weren't asked to do, they're never going to get to a conclusion of the thing that you did ask them.
That was why we were asking for it to be struck and not really hold any weight and be taken out, was because it wasn't a real advisory board. I mean, maybe in the sense of.
No.
You gave very
It was
narrow,
an advisory group that was asked to do one thing.
right, but you gave very narrow parameters.
Right.
So, but then the way that it's being used or the way it could be interpreted, and I think we're beyond this because we're past the build anyway, so it's probably irrelevant at this point. But one of the major reasons we were asking for it to be struck is because then to put that up there, it makes it look to the public, right? That, oh, they have this big advisory committee, they went through everything, we trust them, it's solid, and they wouldn't know, they didn't take into account anything else, except
That
what
was
is
all they were
good for
asked
the
to do.
kids.
And when they fought, and when they
But it's not a real
refocused,
advisory.
they came back and made it, they came back with their opinion,
Mhm.
their
I was
recommendation to
at
the
the
board.
meeting, I
Okay.
understand, but they.
That's
all
what they
held
did.
their hands
That's what they
high.
were asked to do. That's what they did.
I understand.
The
that, but
discussion
that's
about
why-
finance and all this stuff, we're doing
Well,
this
that
now.
wasn't clear in the beginning.
Yes.
It didn't seem like those parameters were set for them. And again, it's very
Well,
narrow
and
when you
that's-
say, because you
that's-
didn't, you said option 1, 2, 3, 4, but there wasn't option 4. The people were trying to bring to the table, there's option 4 and 5, and then it was just cut back.
Okay,
in
so
an
there's
email,
3
1,
options.
2, 3.
I misspoke.
All right,
So
okay,
they
so
looked
I'm gonna go. yeah,
I just feel like it's very relevant
Okay.
because it's not a real advisory.
It-
The parameters were not
Okay.
initially laid out clearly. Maybe that's the issue. I don't mean it in that
Well, I think they
way.
were, and that's the word refocus.
I think it is. Thank you.
I'll start with, and it can be discussed later. If we have a committee to change the mascot, and we have a committee to hire a superintendent and principal, but we're going to downsize or downplay that to an advisory group to discuss $75 million, I don't think it's right. I think there needs to be a committee, and I think without any influence or instruction other than this is what you need to do, look into this, without any influence from the board. And it would be, it's more than just what is best for the kids. How come we're not including a swimming pool in it? So don't you think the kids would love that too? It's, if that was option 4, you would have voted for that one. What is best for the kids? It's not, it's what's best for the kids that can be paid for with whatever number we come up with. And so I just really stress that we reopen it to a committee, and it's has to go by the rules and regulations of a formed committee. We were having to do that anyways with the advisory group because it's you can't just say, well, the group decided this. We had to actually take votes, minutes, and these other things. We had agendas, and so I think it's important to start that group committee back up so we can have these discussions and not have additional school board meetings with an advisory side group. So if this is the advisory group right here in front of us, you should be meeting and then and getting a monthly update on where you were. And that's where I think the group was. What do you think?
So I just was gonna say, I think we're spending a lot of time going backwards right now. Mark was sort of sharing his current recommendation, and Molly was going somewhere with that, and I think we start moving forward rather than examining something that happened in the past. I think we are where we are now. We spent some time at the beginning of the meeting saying how we got here, and now we really start, how do we go forward from here? And we've heard sort of how that went down, and I think there are some valid concerns about that, but I think we've
So,
learned
yeah,
some things, and so how do we, I would sort of like to throw it back to Molly and say, where are we going?
So,
Before we do that, can I just, I think your question was sort of pointed to me about where the advisory committee had landed before we sort of stopped meeting. And I do think that some traction had started to be being made. We've had spent some time going back and sort of re-talking about all these things because new people had come in, but I felt like we were at a place where we were making some good traction. And I feel like if a group similar to that is to come back together without the clouded vision of the 3 options that are very clearly in front of everyone right now, we will continue to make some forward motion. But I think doing it with those big numbers in front of everybody is going to make this task impossible. to clarify, Dave, are you saying you think it should still be an advisory group or a subcommittee of the board? Where we- Okay.
And
So-
if there's no board members on it, so be it.
Well, then
But we
it's
can't
not-
do-
And you're gonna-
we
not something
do
you
that,
can't-
though.
that's-
Then
Then do the-
it is then.
Then do the group? The-
What's that?
Do the advisory group then, where we're not.
What, I don't care what it's called. I really don't
The
care
state
what it's
does.
called,
That's
but
the trouble.
Okay, can I make a
But-
motion?
No, because we're not warned.
Yeah, we
We're-
are.
we're- we're for Action, okay, we're for action here. So let me just before,
Yeah.
the way that the advisory group ended and what the sort of order that we put them in was wrong. And that's my fault. So ultimately that one lands right on me because I sent them the letter. And so some of these people will have been run off from this. And so we lost some good guidance and some people that had done a lot of work. And that is specifically my fault with the letter that I sent them. It forced them in the. So just if anybody's wondering where the blame lies with how that ended, that's on me specifically.
I also just want to say, I understand where it came from in the sense that I know we're diving into education fund and things that they probably wouldn't very easily understand. Because the legislators besides Beck don't even understand education fund. So I understand why the brakes had to be put on, but still, again, it just created the narrow parameters. So
It did.
essentially, we need functional, effective, useful board that can actually create solutions. And that would seem like the next step.
But the first people that we want to reach back out to are those people that are
Right.
here already. And if some of those people say no, that is because of what I did. Just so you know, just so everybody knows, whoever we lose there, that's because of something I did.
I
Just-
think
So
that
maybe
I'll-
we can work together
I'll-
on getting some of those. back.
This is what, so this is what, like, some of these people don't talk to me. There's some people in there that don't talk to me and haven't talked to me in years. And don't talk to me specifically for a reason. And those people just tell them, he knows he did it. And will you come back?
they'll talk to me. I can ask
So
them.
that's one of the reasons that I'm saying this to you, because some of you people are speaking relationship with some of the people in the advisory with whom I don't speak.
But I think the fact that now we're actually having a real conversation and we want to figure out the solutions, I think they will come back.
I'd like all those people back.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I want.
It's a long way.
Now, all I got some,
Can I move, can I make a motion?
Please.
Okay, all right, I move to reconvene the advisory group. Hold on, go back, sorry. Yeah, I move to reconvene the advisory group as a subcommittee of the board to discuss all of the options on the table. With the caveat that any financial information that's needed will go through the board members.
Second,
And I just,
we're back open for discussion. So we got a second, so I'm gonna leave it on. We're back open for discussion.
so you just said three magic words, four magic,
Yeah,
subcommittee of the board,
intentionally, yeah,
which
yeah.
changed the legal structure of that group to a group that now has to have two members, but not,
Right, we did three, yeah,
Yeah.
that was
so
intentional.
now you have to have board members there, and you can have any number of board members because it's a
We can
subcommittee.
have all five.
But you can, when you warn it, you have to have at least
Three.
a quorum
Yeah.
in attendance, or that group cannot meet.
Yeah.
Which was one of the reasons.
Board members only.
I don't think
One of
that'll
the
be a
reasons that
problem.
we moved
Yeah.
away from,
No.
excuse me, one of the reasons that we moved it, we changed it from a subcommittee to an advisory group was to avoid that constraint of needing to have a quorum of the board members on that committee in attendance. So if you want to do it that way, you can, but what you created now was what we started out with, and more complexity in terms, I don't know which three of you are always going to show up.
So
Well, honestly, I mean, three of you now have to show up for that group to meet, and if you can't do that, if you can't get three people to commit and be there every time.
I
That group's not
didn't
gonna
make
be-
a meeting for a personal reason, but I think I could have said, Can you go?
Yeah,
I
Okay,
think it
but,
creates good collaboration.
but just be clear, that three
Yeah,
of you
that's-
have
I
to
was
show
clear,
up,
yeah.
and if only two of you show up, you send everybody home.
right, if only, right.
And we're meeting every 2 weeks as it is anyway, so we're already
Okay,
here as
all right.
it is, so I think.
I just wanted to be clear
appreciate
about that,
Yeah, I
because
appreciate
it's-
the homework.
One other thing, just on the language, you had said, and this is just like a language thing, I'm sorry, I get particular about that sometimes, you had said all the options on the table. which is there a reference? I don't think there is to 1, 2, and 3. So I think just to open it up and say to consider all possible solutions is very different than all the options on the table, because to us, that still means 1, 2, 3. I think at least me, that's only 1, 2, 3. So I think just maybe a little clarity around that.
Yeah, I thought about putting a limit on there, like a threshold, but I also
Right.
don't want the group
You
to
can't have a
be,
threshold.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
so. Yeah, I could, we
So-
could, what do you, what's the board think about the language of
I
that?
think the language is fine, and I think that, I would ask you to trust us a little bit here,
Mhm.
based on some of the conversations that we've had.
Sure.
And a motion, got a second.
Like David, not Dave, second.
A second. So are we gonna put members on this committee? Oh, wait, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Okay, motion carries.
I'll volunteer.
On it.
Yeah.
Is everybody gonna come?
Yeah.
So I'll take a motion to put all 5 board members on the committee.
With,
That's a legal rule. The open meeting law says
with 3 of them,
the board-
because right now, 2 boards, I'm sorry, 1 board member has to be there.
That's, those rules are done, because now it's a committee, and so
Now,
it's.
at least
open
3
meeting
have to
law,
be there.
Regular. So
I will volunteer to
that's a
be
motion,
one
so
of
you're
them.
making a motion. You're making a motion. You want to make a motion to put all 5 board members of the Danville School Board on this newly formed building advisory committee?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Oh, discussion, wait, discussion. So this is the same stuff, the same meetings, just now they're called something different. All in favor?
Aye.
So that's that. And we're closing that one. Now, the next one, we add this to the agenda. What do I say to the reporter tomorrow? So the reporter's going to talk. And a report like, so. Okay, I'm gonna come talk to Mr. Tucker as well, and he's gonna say, this is the situation, and he's gonna talk about the building plan. And then he's gonna talk about all this stuff, and then I'm gonna talk to this person as well, and I'm super good at this and not nervous at all. And everything's gonna be fine,
You're in close conversation with the community.
This is-
and
this is
take
the-
Answers together that are real.
like that. So, but, so something like that. Does anybody up here have anything specific that they want said?
I think it's important to highlight that we are a rural, small community. This is happening throughout the country. We need help if we're gonna move forward with many of these options. I mean, I think that's the reality of where we're at, is we have a small tax base, we have a small school, and it's not just Danville that's in this situation in Vermont and nationwide.
But
to
it's
everyone.
collaborative.
Right, so but I think that I mean, it's possible that you hear me say the words too much. Okay, so this is, we're all talking, right? Too much. I already know. I'm not, you didn't tell me this. I knew it already. I knew it already. From the minute I saw the first number the first time, the first thing I thought was too much. And the first number I saw was just on sprinklers. So too much is, we're sitting here doing this. Too much. All right? That's where we are. So we're gonna set the next meeting, but it's now gonna be of this committee. But we want to set it in 2 weeks. Rob Balabay, who is here, he does something on Tuesday night. So I want these to not be on Tuesday nights, because that is a valuable person. And he's missing, I goes to choir, and I would much rather have him in this room with us, because he's a valuable person. So I want to try to move these to a different night and see if it's based on schedule. Do you want to try to schedule that tonight, or can I schedule that at our regular meeting and then get back to you guys? You guys know where?
Hey, it's Sarah. Can you hear me? Can we, since you just suggested it, can we schedule it on Tuesday?
Yeah, you were way more than this. You were 3 times the spend. And you were right. We're putting you in the room. You were 3 times the spend. Right, man.
Against her, not just scared the hell out of
Sorry.
Sarah, what'd you say?
Can we do it on Tuesday and set it on Tuesday? Because I think we're probably going to have another meeting, a special meeting because of the budget too.
Not on next Tuesday. We would just be discussing what day we would be having these, not the same.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. Yep.
Schedule and meet.
Right.
Because on Tuesday night, you will also be scheduling a special meeting for budget.
We would schedule that separately. We would not schedule a budget meeting at the same.
And I think she's saying, do all the scheduling at once.
Yeah,
So
so,
that it's more
if that-
likely to be in the calendar.
right,
without
so
overlapping.
the only meeting that we currently have on the schedule are the regular board meetings of the Danville School, which is the first Tuesday of every month for right now. So our next meeting is next Tuesday at 6. We're gonna be talking about the budget for this year. And I know that you guys just conversationally, I know that you've all talked about inflation and whatever. We are an employer of people who have healthcare. So next week, when we talk about the budget, we're gonna talk about some of the. So if you wanna come talk to me then, come talk to me then. And that's next week. And then at that time, we'll schedule those meetings, and then they'll be posted in the regular posting places and on the Facebook page or whatever. So we'll get to this, we'll get to these meetings. And if you show up to these committee meetings and you say, I want to be on the committee, you'll certainly be considered. Cool.
We're in the library.
We're back in the library ideally. It depends on.
Unless you're all coming again, in which case we'll figure something.
Okay, and in the short term, that's the end of this meeting. If I can get a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it.
Oh, wait, is there any public input? Sorry.
Yeah, I think,
Oh, good.
I think, when you look at, when you schedule this for, if you just take the sport schedules into account.
Sure.
So a lot of.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Excellent
like, I
point.
won't be able to be at Tuesdays because we have a scrimmage.
Okay, so this, you,
Yeah, the Danville program.
so we'll try, but they're pretty fun, they're pretty variable.
Yeah, I hear you.
Basketball schedules and you got,
Probably goes without.
Sarah and I have them on our computers.
but they'll be in the room with
Room
us.
use and basketball, and we have it all.
Okay, cool. All right, motion to adjourn. Should I get one? I got a motion from Tim, second, all in favor? Meeting adjourned, 8:06.
Dave or me?